Hello, I'm Dr. Pierre Simon, and it's wonderful being back with you as we continue in our series of Embracing the Unfamiliar, talking about navigating that fear of the unknown, those scary things. I had a scary thing happen to me a week or two ago where I had an ingrown toenail and I had to go to the doctor, and I was saying, oh no, and he had to take off the toenail, but I've never had that happen before. I've seen it happen with one of my boys when they were young and they had to have that happen. But I thought, oh no, and that was unknown. And I was more afraid of the pain of the needle than anything else. I knew once the injection was done, then it was going to numb it and it would be okay. But I'm thinking the pain of the needle, and he did a wonderful job. I didn't even feel the needle going in, but that fear of the unknown made me stressed, made me apprehensive. And that's what we're talking about. This stuff that we're not familiar with tends to cause us to avoid things. And some of the things we avoid are actually good for us. They help us to grow. It helped me to relieve my discomfort by going to the doctor and getting that done. But had I not done it because of the fear of the unknown, I'd still be limping around and miserable. That's what happens when we let the fear of the unknown or those unfamiliar things control us. And that's what we've been talking about. The fear of the unknown significantly impacts our lives by influencing our decisions, shaping our perceptions, and those new experiences that we have potential for. We don't participate in those new experiences because of that fear of the unknown. And so what happens then? Well, anxiousness, stress. I was anxious and stressed when I went to the doctor. I felt a whole lot better when I was leaving because now I've experienced the unknown. It wasn't that bad after all. I had blown it up to be a lot worse than what it really was. Exploring the concept of the fear of the unknown is a fundamental aspect of human psychology or mental and emotional studies. This fear, technically known as xenophobia, in its extreme forms, can manifest in various aspects of our life, including those personal choices that we make, everyday choices, our social interactions, going to church or going to work or going out to dinner, our reactions to change. Some people have very difficult reactions to change. They can't adjust to change very well, so they just don't care for it. And in some cases, maybe it's something going on. Perhaps there's a high functioning autism or something of that nature, which makes change very difficult for them. So there's a biological occurrence that is inhibiting that for some people. And you don't hold that against them. You accept it, you understand it, and they're making the best of it that they can. But for the rest of us that may not be affected in that way, it's holding us back. It's restraining us from making changes or adjusting when there's a change at work and the boss says, well, we're going to do something different this time. Whoa, wait a minute. You always have somebody who's going to have a lot of difficulties with that change, and they may do very well in the change. Most of them do, but they need a little more time to adjust to it. So some people, I may say, especially if they're loners, very serious private people, they're independent, self-motivated, they don't like change. So when there's a change that occurs at work, they need a little more time to make those adjustments. And sometimes they'll come in and they want to quit their job and they're very unhappy because of this change that's occurring. And I'll just say, give it a little time. Take a few extra weeks with it. Read about it, study about it, get used to it. And then in 30 days or in 60 days, make that decision at that point, but don't make it right now. And most of the time, 95% of the time, in 30 or 60 days, they feel a whole lot better about it, and they're not wanting to quit their jobs or whatever it might be at that point. This fear, technically known as xenophobia that we've talked about before, can be debilitating. It's rooted in human tendency of preferring what's familiar. being used to something or situations and avoiding the risk that's associated with those uncertain outcomes. The fear of the unknown is deeply rooted in human psyche. That is, it's there since creation. It's been there all along. From the Christian perspective, we can trace it back to creation. According to studies that have been done, this fear or intolerance of uncertainty can be understood as a fundamental characteristic of humans, of our need for survival. Every day we're trying to survive. Every day we're trying to get through the day, and we're trying to succeed and do well. That's a need for survival, for adapting, and that's important for us. It triggers a defensive response when there's uncertainty. There's a threat that comes up, and it comes up from the basement of the brain that we've talked about before, that limbic system, that fight or flight center of the brain. And it's a threat, it's an uncertainty. I have to protect myself. So self-protection kicks in, fear and apprehension kick in. Wherever there's self-protection, there's selfishness. And it's those uncertainties that make us selfish. We're not thinking of you, we're thinking of ourselves. The fear of the unknown significantly affects decision-making processes. People prefer to make choices with predictable outcomes over uncertain ones, even if the uncertain option is potentially higher payoff. One of the issues I've learned over the years, and I initially learned it in college many years ago at Stetson University, where I graduated for my bachelor's degree in psychology, but I started off in business and accounting, and I thought, well, that's not for me. But I learned some things about business, and one of the things I learned, and I forgot the term, but one of the things I learned is when a business is growing, and somebody starts a business and it's growing, there's a point where the owner of the business has to expand his thinking. If he expands his thinking, the business grows. And if he doesn't, then the business stifles. It stays the same, but it never stays the same for a period of time. It'll stay shortly the same, but eventually it stifles and it begins to decrease, whether there's competition and so on and so forth. If that owner doesn't bring in those people to stimulate, to help make the adjustments that are necessary, well, then he's going to have trouble keeping the business going. And so you see these big corporations where some of them just kind of wither away because whoever's in charge is afraid of change and they want to keep everything the same the way it was. Now, you can keep a lot of things the same, but you have to make certain adjustments to many of those things in adapting and so on. But what happens is then it's a spiraling downward of the business. And there's a business term for that. That fear of the unknown significantly affected the owner or director or president's way of making his company succeed. People prefer to make those choices that are predictable. And so individuals with, let's say, obsessive compulsive issues, they may not have the disorder, but they may lean towards thinking a certain way, ritualizing and so on. And, that's going to cause some problems in the long run, especially when it has to do with relationship. And a lot of businesses have to do with relationship, relating to the customers and relating to the employees as well. The story of Jonah offers a compelling example of the affect of how fear of the unknown will affect how we relate to unfamiliar groups or cultures. And I want to remind you to read your Old Testament. That's a history book. It's a factual history book. It's not a fantasy. It's not pretend. It's not the way someone wished it could be and then wrote it that way. It's actual factual history. And when you read that history, you're learning and you're growing. So it's very important to read the Old Testament and recognize it's teaching us something in helping us to grow. Those characters, those stories, they all have lessons in them for us to learn. And Jonah is one of those stories in regard to embracing the unfamiliar, or that fear of the unknown. While traditionally explored for its themes of disobedience, repentance, and divine mercy, this narrative also offers profound insights into social identity theory and the fear of the unknown concerning interactions with unfamiliar groups or cultures. Nineveh, the capital of Assyria at the time, was known to be the Israelites' enemy. You know, they were a formidable and morally questionable enemy as far as the Israelites were concerned. Jonah's reluctance to preach to the Ninevites may reflect his personal fear of failure or reprisal and a deeper collective apprehension about engaging with a group so starkly different, so awful, so horrific. He just couldn't, I can't offer them forgiveness. I can't offer them this or that. That's not right. They're terrible, awful people. They've enslaved my people. They've done this, they've done that. And he was reluctant, and so reluctant that he was doing the opposite. He was antagonistic towards what God was asking him to do. Jonah's story underscores a critical lesson to the dangers of allowing such fears to dictate our actions, highlighting the importance of openness, compassion, and a willingness to engage with those things that are different, those people that are different, those cultures that are different. By engaging, we're learning. By learning, we're growing, we're experiencing. Everyone benefits when we're engaging, we're learning, and we're growing. And that's when you know God's involved. Whenever God is doing something, I've noticed over the years, over 30 years of Christian counseling, when God is doing something, it benefits everybody. Everybody seems to benefit from his actions. When we selfishly are doing something, maybe we might benefit, but it's to the expense of everyone else. But when we let God do it, when we let God open doors and close doors, and we walk through them, we have to certainly do that. But when we allow him to make those adjustments or open opportunities and so on, it benefits everyone. If someone closes a door and says, well, I don't like you anymore, I'm firing you from this business, get out of here, it's their loss. Oh, okay, well, God, I'm looking for you to open a door here. This one closed. Don't harbor ill feelings about what just happened. Think of it as an opportunity of growing, of changing, of going forward. Okay, Lord, what now? Because if you hold a grudge, what's it going to do? It's going to prevent you from walking through the next door that opens up. Or if you try to walk through it with a grudge, you're going to spread that grudge around and the door will quickly close before you can get fully through it. Let go and let God, as they would say. It's important to engage. Don't be afraid to engage in those unfamiliar things or with unfamiliar people. The eventual outcome of Jonah's mission, Nineveh's repentance and salvation from destruction, is a powerful testament to the transformative potential of overcoming fears and prejudices. It demonstrates that positive outcomes can emerge from interactions with unfamiliar cultures or groups, challenging the stereotypes that you may have believed to be true over the years, and fostering mutual understanding and reconciliation. Now, every group is not a healthy group, and certainly you don't want to interact with unhealthy groups. You have to use wisdom in regard to picking and choosing. But most of them are pretty good. Most cultures, most groups, they're no different than you, me, and anybody else. take that risk a little bit, get to know, be friendly, open the door, let more people into your churches, or open doors of opportunity wherever possible, wisely, with insight, with good judgment. Jonah's story is a good example of that, and Jonah's story echoes the New Testament's call for Christians to embrace a spirit of love and understanding towards all transcending cultural, ethnic, and social divides. What happened to Nineveh? Well, they repented. They worshiped the fish god, and Jonah came out of a fish, was witness being vomited out of a fish, and oh my gosh, and that word got around quick, and the word of God spread as a result of that, and they repented, and for years they were friendly, they were good, they made those positive changes. So it benefited everyone. Clinically, the fear of the unknown is closely linked with anxiety disorders or anxiety issues. An article or research that was done by Group A and Nitschke in 2013 outlines how anticipatory anxiety about unknown or uncertain future events can trigger excessive worry or fear and apprehension, a characteristic of various anxiety disorders. Existential fear, and remember the word existential is talking about life, life and death, interacting with your life around you. As Fritz Perls would say, the gestalt, your mindfulness, everything going on around you, that's existential life. And existential fear then would be the fear of non-being, non-existing. It's a fundamental part of human condition, which can only be overcome through spiritual courage found in faith, trust. Hope is another good word to use there. The fear of the unknown in the biblical narrative of Adam and Eve is another great Old Testament example of hiding from God, where they felt they were vulnerable. They felt exposed in some way, and it helps us to understand that lens of what were they seeing, what were they feeling, what were they thinking. It's a theological, a psychological, and philosophical perspective that when we read it, we see all these things there. Adam and Eve hide after eating the forbidden fruit, symbolizing their newfound awareness of evil. And what's evil? Well, it's fear. And basically, that's bottom line of what evil is. It's fear. And the introduction of fear and shame into the human experience, if you think about it for a moment, and as I was writing this, I was thinking, I never really thought of that before, never thought of it this way, but the tree of good and evil, it really wasn't a tree of good and evil. I mean, if you think about it, they already knew good. Everything they experienced was good. So they had full knowledge of what was good. The tree didn't have good in it. The tree had evil in it. It represented the darkness. It represented fear. It represented an awareness of what could go wrong. And when they ate that fruit, suddenly they knew the difference between good and evil, right and wrong. Adam and Eve's disobedience led to a realization of their nakedness and vulnerability. And what did that do? Well, it prompted fear. Metaphorically linked to the human fear of being exposed or judged. The fear of vulnerability and exposure can profoundly affect human behavior and relationships, according to the studies that have been done. In 1 John chapter 4, verses 17 to 18 in the Remedy Bible, we read this: "It is in this way, through the fellowship of a community of love, that God's true character of love is made complete among us. And because we have been restored to full unity with Him and are like Him in heart, with God, and are like God in heart, mind, and character, we're confident to stand before God, before Him, in love. There is no fear. Fear is part of the infection of selfishness, but is purged by love, as fear has to do with concern for oneself, self-protection. The one who remains self-focused and afraid of something new, afraid of change, afraid of the unknown, self-focused and afraid has not been healed by God's love. So it's saying in this passage, God's love can heal that fear. So the passage explains how faith often counteracts fear and how providing certainty in uncertain situations is crucial. Well, next time we're going to talk about grasping the essence of fear toward uncertainty. I hope you'll join us. May your troubles be minor, blessings more, and happiness come through your door. God bless.